So we are live on YouTube. Madam Chair, if you want to call us to order, I'll let you start.
Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Today is April the 21st, and it is 3:01 on this date. So I would like to call the meeting to order of the Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. If we could get roll call and have the city clerk please conduct a roll call of attendees for the purpose of identifying who's present, as well as to determine if we have a quorum. Madam City Clerk.
Yes, give me one moment. I'm pulling up my Prime Gov. Give me G, do you want to do roll call? You have your Prime Gov up.
Sure.
Cool.
Commissioner Grazier,
I am present.
Commissioner Donato,
You know what, G, I see him in the waiting room and I'm trying to promote him in. So I also gave him permission
okay.
to talk. So I don't know if he's connected.
I could come back to him.
Okay.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Here, present.
thank you. Commissioner Ortiz,
Present.
Commissioner Rickers,
Present.
Commissioner Breckner,
Here.
and Commissioner Quintana. Thank you, Chair. You have a quorum.
Thank
we-
you.
Do we get Donato on? I don't see
Is he
it.
almost on? We want to make sure he's included in the roll call vote. We lost our clerk. Miss Christine, are you still with us?
Yeah, she got back on.
Okay.
Commissioner Donato, can you hear us?
G, I think he might have hopped off. Now I don't see him at all. So if he tries to reconnect, I'll provide
Okay.
notification when he
We have a
rejoins.
quorum.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ms. Cardenas, for that. And, you know, before we move forward, I'd like to at least acknowledge for those that are watching us, besides the commissioners who were able to introduce themselves previously, and I'm hoping that Commissioner Quintana had an opportunity to see the last meeting we had. She wasn't able to join us, but at that meeting, we all introduced ourselves. And if you had a chance to see that, Commissioner Quintana, you were able to learn a little bit about the different board members. But since you're the new one to the group that wasn't with us last 2 weeks ago, maybe you could just give a brief intro about yourself so that the board members know who our 7th member is. Commissioner Quintana?
Sure, good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. My name is Carmela Quintana. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico, born and raised. I graduated from St. Michael's High School and the University of New Mexico. And I then joined the Air Force, where I served for 20 years. I've done a couple of assignments at the legislature, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And now I work for the United States Senate full-time. And I have another degree from George Washington University. But I'm just happy to be here and happy to serve as however I can. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And welcome to all the other commissioners that were here last week that introduced themselves. And I also like to make sure for the listening public, if anyone is listening to us, that they know who the city officials are that are working with us, helping us through this process. And they're familiar with who they are. So we have our city clerk, Christine McHelsick. I hope I got that right. And she's our city clerk, and our assistant city clerk is Geraldine Cardenas. And then our senior attorney with the city is Marcos Martinez. And those are the city staff that's working really hard to help us move forward. And I'll let our consultant introduce his counterparts, his folks, when he gets ready to do the presentation. But I just wanted to make sure everyone listening that was watching in could know who the 7 commissioners are, and then the city staff helping us. So let's move on with the approval of the agenda. And we have an agenda that was sent out to you today. And I want to make sure that you all have looked at that. I'd like to ask our city clerk if she has needs to make any comments on the agenda before I take a motion for approval of the agenda.
I apologize, Chairwoman. Our attorney was calling on a different matter. I don't have any comments other than I know, oh, hold on, Gary's joining us. I know there were some technical issues with PrimeGov as we loaded the new committee. So I did just want to note that there might have been concerns about that, but I believe Marcos sent a clarification, our attorney, on that. The meeting was noticed, the agenda was posted, and then we did correct where on the footer it was saying finance. That's because that was used as the template for this agenda. So I do just want to note those items.
Okay, great. So we're on item number 3, approval of the agenda. Do you have a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner Donato and Commissioner Bretschner, second? Is that okay? Any discussion on the agenda? Okay, I see no hands raised, either on the Zoom or physically raising your hand. So all in favor? Well, I guess we need to do a roll call on the approval of the agenda. Sorry, apologies. Roll call, please.
Okay, Commissioner Grazier?
Aye.
Commissioner Donato?
Aye.
Commissioner McKenzie?
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Aye.
Commissioner Rickers?
Aye.
Commissioner Breckner?
Yes.
And Commissioner Quintana?
Aye.
Motion is passed.
Thank you. That was pretty unanimous. Appreciate that. So item number 4 is approval of consent agenda. And we have no consent agenda, so I think we'll just move on. Is that appropriate, Madam City Clerk? Yes. Okay. I guess in the future that would be the case. And these are standard items on the agenda that will remain there apparently. And we'll just use them when they're necessary and go over them when they're not. Great. Item number 5 is approval of the minutes. And these are the minutes of the April 7, 2022 meeting. I will entertain a motion and a second for approval of them, or if there's any corrections, now would be the time to note that. Commissioner Bretschner.
Thank you. I had sent to staff and to you, Madam Chair, some items, and I don't know whether they're appropriate or not. Let me just call them up. But at the prior meeting and not in the minutes, there were others attending, and I had listed six people who were participating in the meeting. And if you'd like me to read them, I can, or if there's information that I need to know as to why they weren't listed, just let me know that now. And then I have one other item.
So, Madam City Clerk, you got Mr. Bretschner's email. Thank you for sending that to me as well.
Sure.
So, Madam City Clerk, your comments in that regard, please.
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioner Breckner, if you would like to make changes, you would list them out and then the commission will vote on them. So if you could note that you would like to include certain individuals be noted as present, you would do that and then it would be included on for the vote, with the exception of bringing, showing, and we can note that in the original drafts distributed, there was the finance committee tagline was still on some of the agendas. Those have been corrected and that technical issue has been corrected.
Right. Well, then the names I had listed who were in attendance in addition to those members and the assistant city clerk who was listed, Christine Busos-Mihalcik, you were there. Marcos Martinez, the senior assistant city attorney was there. George Duncan, one of our alternates, was there. And the three representatives from research and polling, Brian Sanderoff, Michael Sharp, and Brittany Post were there. And those were the ones I had suggested we list as attending as well.
So, Mr. Commissioner Bretschner, that's your motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, and then I had one other item. Do you want me to include that and we make it all one agenda, one motion?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, the second item then, beyond those names being listed, was on page 3 of the proposed minutes under matters from the committee. We did amend the agenda to have a presentation, and I thought a 1-line or 2-line summary of that presentation, and I had proposed wording to be that there was a presentation from the ICRC outside advisor research and polling detailing redistricting code provisions and related objectives and limitations, and providing City of Santa Fe election district recent census data as compared to data used in the prior redistricting in 2015. So I would make a motion to include the 6 names and the explanation of what the presentation was.
Okay, I have a motion for inclusion of additional names showing who attended as well as the explanation of the presentation. Do I have a second?
I'll
From
second.
Commissioner Donato. Okay. Any discussion? No hands are being raised. There's a good catches. I think it's real important to reflect all attendees at our meetings. I think that's good for historical information, and I appreciate you, Commissioner Bretschner, for doing that and also adding the language that clarifies the presentation. So if there is no further discussion or questions, will the city clerk please do a roll call and for approval of the April 7th minutes?
Yeah, actually, our assistant city clerk is gonna
Okay,
run today's
sorry.
meeting.
All right.
So
Okay.
yes.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Grazier,
Aye.
Commissioner Donato,
Aye.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Reckers, Commissioner Breckner,
Aye.
and Commissioner Quintana.
Aye.
Okay, Madam Chair, minutes are approved as amended.
Thank you. Thank you very much, staff, and thank you, Commissioner Breckner, for doing that work and bringing that forward. Appreciate that. So let's move on to item number 6, matters from the staff, and I'll turn that over to whomever needs to do that portion.
I'll take that.
Okay.
I just would like to introduce our GIS staff, Leonard Padilla. Leonard Padilla is in the ITT department and in the GIS division, and is familiar with redistricting. And if there's anything you'd like to say, Leonard, go ahead.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been with the city now for 16 plus years, and I've worked with Brian in the past. So if you need anything, Brian, for me, just let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla, and welcome. And we look forward to all working collaboratively together to do the best job we can for our city. Thank you for joining us this evening.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other introductions, Assistant City Clerk Cardenas?
No other matters from staff.
Okay. So we get to move on to the meat of the the big topic of our agenda, the presentation. So I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Sanderoff and let you do your magic, and we will sit and listen attentively.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commissioners. And Brittany is going to share her screen for our PowerPoint presentation. And so, again, appreciate being here. 2 weeks ago, we went over some general principles of districting and some city statistics. We're going to briefly recap them for members of the public that perhaps were not involved in the meeting 2 weeks ago. Also, we know that there was a lot to absorb, and so doing the refresher we find is helpful. In addition, we'll show some new population statistics, and then Brittany will go over some initial conceptual plans or ideas for the public's consideration and for your consideration. And so that's what we'll do today. So without further ado, let's move on and to the next slide. And so as we went over 2 weeks ago, Research and Polling does have a lot of experience in the redistricting area. In fact, this is our 4th cycle of working with the city of Santa Fe. On a personal note, I became a proud first-time homeowner in 1980 in Santa Fe on the west side, and we've worked in Santa Fe also for decades as well. But myself, Michael Sharp, who you met last 2 weeks ago, and Brittany Poss will be the key staff people working on the project. Others are working on it as well. Okay, in terms of the process, and this is pretty much outlined in your ordinance. We had the first meeting 2 weeks ago that was organizational, and we went over a general overview and population statistics. This is the second meeting, education and directives to us. We're going to once again briefly go over the principles, show initial concepts, then get public input and commission input. Then there'll be, according to the ordinance, at least 4 public meetings where they get to look at the concepts, suggest revisions from the public, from the commission. We then, revise the plan. Sometimes we might be tweaking. Other times we might come up with whole new concepts, or the public may. And we'll just go through that iterative process until we come up with something that you all feel comfortable with and are ready to adopt. So it's a process that involves the public and the commission through and through. Today, we'll go over some initial concepts to allow people to react. We always find that it's best for people to react to something and then give us their ideas as well. Okay, on the next slide, again, what is redistricting? It's the adjustment of the election district boundaries to account for population shifts. Now, one thing that is really important is that it's done after every decennial census, because that's when the census data are fresh. And most governmental bodies do it once a decade. They don't like to take it on a second time in the same decade. It's hard enough to do it once. But Santa Fe City Charter does allow for redistricting more than once per decade. And in fact, Santa Fe did, working with that independent commission for the first time, redistrict in 2015 after the major annexation. So the current districts that Santa Fe is under today already account for the major annexation that occurred in 2014, and that was 13,200 people. The fact that it was done twice in the decade makes the shifts or the change in population not as significant. Okay, the 5 basic principles of districting that have come out of federal law, state law, case law, traditional districting principles are these. The top 2 are most important according to federal law. Federal law is very clear, a case law, on what those pertain to. As it relates to equal population, there are different standards of what is considered equal population between districts, depending whether it's Congress or City Council. We'll talk about that in a minute. Minority voting rights, that pertains to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, not to dilute the voting strength of ethnic or language protected minority groups. A contiguity simply means that the precincts within a district must touch at least in one point in space. You can't have 2 islands within a district. Compactness, it is what it is. It's the shape of the district, and it should be compact. And if you see a lot of districts that look like snakes or pencils, you can question it. There are lots of different mathematical measures to measure compactness, but pretty much you know it when you see it. And that's hardly been a problem ever in Santa Fe in creating compact districts. Of course, the municipal boundary lines, the outer boundary lines of the city limits, that we're forced to conform to. So sometimes you'll have squiggly lines on the outside, only this is the city limits. And then communities of interest. What are they? Well, different things to different people, but shared values and interests, economic, social. Oftentimes people talk about their neighborhood and what district it belongs in, but different people have different views on communities of interest. Okay, so we talked about equal population. And so what is the ideal population of a district? The ideal population sort of means the perfect population if it was identical in each district. And so the way you calculate that is you simply take the population of the city as stated in the 2020 official US Census population, and that was 87,505 people. So Santa Fe has 4 dual member city council districts, 2 councilors per district, as you know, but there are still only 4 districts, 8 councilors. So if you take the population of the city and you divide it by 4, the ideal population of a district would be 21,876. But there is an allowable deviation from the ideal population. And what the case law says, and even the ordinance, is that one should have substantially equal population. And then that's been defined in the federal courts as, well, as long as there's no more than a 10% population deviation between the smallest and the largest district, then you're okay, assuming that you use that deviation for good reasons and not for illegitimate reasons. The state statute then fine-tunes and makes that no more than 10% population deviation even more specific. By the statute says for local governments such as the city of Santa Fe that you should stick within a plus or minus 5% from the ideal population of a district. And so those two are consistent, but under that first one, 6 minus 6 and plus 4 might work. This is still a total deviation of no more than 10, but the state law fine-tunes it and says, well, keep the district deviations to plus or minus 5% from the ideal population. So if the ideal population is 21,800, take plus or minus 5% from the ideal. And that's the range that you have in population differentiation among the districts and still stay within the state statute and federal case law. We talked about the Voting Rights Act. Again, we could spend 5 hours just on this topic, but the bottom line is do not dilute the minority voting strength. The word minority is a word in census terminology in case law, but the protected groups under the Voting Rights Act include Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians. It's language and racial language minority groups. The key is to give a minority population an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. The law doesn't say it has to be guaranteed, or do what you can to make sure, and even in a Hispanic majority district, the goal isn't necessarily to elect a Hispanic candidate. The goal is to elect a candidate who's the preferred candidate of the Hispanics or of the minority population. Oftentimes it can be someone of a different racial group. At the same time, on the next slide, we see that on the one hand, you take into account not diluting the voting strength of ethnic, language, and minority groups, but yet you don't want to create race-based districts. That it's the only thing that you consider in subordination of traditional districting principles. Here you see an example of African Americans being packed into a district that's adjacent to an interstate, and they're packed in such a way that many African American communities have nothing in common in these particular neighborhoods. And so it was deemed to be a district that that race was the predominant criteria. Basically, the African Americans were packed into one district, and that was ruled as not proper. How do you know if you see racial gerrymander, if you see a lot of packing going on or a lot of cracking? Cracking would be if you took a Hispanic area and divided it 5 different districts, 4 different districts, so that they get a majority in none of the districts. Okay, so we talked about compactness. On the right-hand side, you see a graphic of a Texas congressional district that is not compact. On the left-hand side, you see the northern New Mexico 3rd Northern District that includes Santa Fe. It might be vast and go from Farmington to Clayton, but it took that much geography to find 1/3 of the population of the state. And so you can have a district that's large, but does it look like a square? Does it look like a rectangle? Does it look like a circle, and show some compactness as compared to what you see on the right-hand side of the page? Contiguity, again, on the right-hand side, District A is not contiguous because there are 2 islands. You can't walk District A because you'd have to go through District B to get there, so it's not contiguous. The trickiest one really comes down to communities of interest, because oftentimes that's in the eyes of the beholder as to what the most salient community of interest is. And you will hear differing opinions on that, and that's fine. But usually it's a group or area with shared characteristics, neighborhoods, cultural, language, historical traditions, geographic boundaries, lived experiences. A community interest and a traditional districting principle that you can consider is maintaining the core of existing districts to minimize voter confusion, or if elected officials have established a good rapport and relationship with the particular area. Respecting political subdivisions is a community of interest you can consider. Now, avoiding precinct splits, in none of the plans that we're going to show do we split any precincts, unless, of course, a precinct happens to go beyond the city limits and into the county. There, of course, we stick within the city boundaries. But 10 years ago, within the last decade, Santa Fe has added a lot of new precincts. The precincts are the building blocks of districting and also of running elections. City clerks don't like it when we split lots of precincts. And because there are so many precincts as building blocks, none of our plans did we find the need to split precincts. And we'll talk more about that. You can take into account incumbents' residential location as a general principle of communities of interest and give it the weight that you want as you go. It has been considered that way. Okay, now within the charter, they prioritize these principles. So right within the charter, and the ordinance repeats them, it says, in order of priority, please take into account equal population and minority voting rights in this order that you see here. So in the plans that Brittany's going to show, the concepts, when it comes to equal population, we always stick with, we never go beyond the plus or minus 5% deviation among the districts. When it comes to minority voting strength, we always maintain 2 adult Hispanic majority districts in all concepts. Currently, there are 2. We always maintain 2 within these plans. Communities of interest within the ordinance, it speaks of trying to preserve in a single district ethnic and economic factors. And you'll see in the concepts that we do comply with that, compactness and contiguity. And then 5th in the rank order here within the ordinance is compensate for the undercount of minorities. Well, we didn't get a specific report from the US Census Bureau on the undercount in Santa Fe. Nationally, the Census Bureau did acknowledge that Hispanics may have been estimated to be undercounted by 5% nationally, African Americans by 3%. But all the case law shows that you're required to use the actual census data for better or worse in the course of doing the redistricting when it comes to total population. Now, there are tension between these principles. For example, you can't come up with the perfect plan. There is no such thing as a perfect plan because it depends on the level of prioritization you take onto these items. But you want to stay legal on all of the items, but still could prioritize one over another. For example, let's say someone says, I really want you to keep my neighborhood in one district, but that then moves you further away from the ideal population of a district or makes the lines not quite as compact anymore. And so again, no perfect plan, depends on one's priorities and perspectives. Okay, within the ordinance, it also does say that you, the commission, may assign the appropriate weight. It doesn't tell you what that weight is, for you to decide the appropriate weight to minimizing precinct splits. And again, there, we had no reason to split precincts at this time because we found that we could draw good plans, good concepts without doing it. And we have a lot more building blocks than we did in past decades. The ordinance also says that assign the appropriate weight to minimizing voter confusion in switching elected officials into different districts. Well, you know, the people who are on the city council now are different from who were on the city council 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And these people who are representing these various districts now live in different places than the councilors who were elected perhaps 5 or 10 years ago. And so you can take into account, we've got some plans that Brittany's going to go over that are minimal change plans that don't impact the councilors in switching them into different districts. But if you want to consider other wholly different concepts, then inevitably those wholly different concepts will sometimes pair councilors, which could create that confusion. And the ordinance allows you to give it the appropriate weight that you consider. Do you choose a plan that pairs incumbents? Do you choose a plan that doesn't? You would take into account the quality of those plans and which ones you think conform to all of the principles as you go. We've got it both ways. Okay, moving along to the next table, next slide. So we went over this last time. In the last decade, the growth in population change in Santa Fe was 29%, or 19,000 people. However, the 19,000 people there does include the 13,200 people who were annexed into the city in 2014. So then the redistricting occurred in 2015. So the current districts that we're dealing with now did account for the majority of the population change that has occurred in the past decade. Those people were accounted for in the annexation. The next slide shows you the population change after the annexation, after the redistricting. So there are 6,400 people more people in Santa Fe since the last redistricting. If all of them were distributed perfectly equally within the city, then the population deviations might work. That was not the case. We'll talk about that. But a lot of the change in Santa Fe's population was already accounted for in the 2015 redistricting. Okay, so here is the 4 city council districts, districts 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are the current district boundaries. And it shows the population deviation from the ideal. So we talked about how by state law, you've got to stay within the plus or minus 5%. So District 1 happens to fall within the plus or minus 5% at minus 2% lower deviation than the ideal population of a district. District 2 is just slightly too small in the sense that it goes beyond the minus 5% deviation to minus 5.4. District 3, just by a touch, is at minus 5.05. And we're looking to have deviations of no more than 5.0. But the most interesting thing on this page is that District 4 has a population deviation of 12.7% higher than the ideal population. So what Brittany is going to show are different concepts of how to deal with this. Some will be minimal changes just to shift that additional population in District 4 into Districts 2 and 3. Others will be wholly different concepts just because it's our job to give you new ideas to run. You might like a more status quo oriented plan, the districts that we have today, but it's our job to show different concepts to get the ball rolling. On the next slide, this is citywide racial and ethnic population. Notice that the percent Hispanic in Santa Fe is 46.5%. This is within the city. The non-Spanish white population is the same. Asians about 2%, Native American 1.5%, about African American 1%, other 3%. The way you read the white is it's non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic Asian, and so on. So it adds up to close to 100% by doing it this way. Now, if you look at the 2010 census, after annexation, Santa Fe's adult Hispanic population was 49 point something percent. So the percent Hispanic in Santa Fe has actually dropped 3 points using the 2010 census after the annexation. I think some of that was the undercount personally, but it is that is what we're facing. Now here's a new map that you haven't seen before, and it's fascinating. And what you're looking at here is the percent adult Hispanic at the precinct level, remembering that the precincts are the building blocks of districting and from which we run our elections. And so what do we see? I'm colorblind. My folks tell me that purple is the predominant color here. So the darker the purple, the higher the proportion of percent adult Hispanic. So the darkest purple is between 75% and 100% adult Hispanic within that precinct. The next shade is 50 to 74.9%. The next shade, what I would call blue, the lighter purple, 35 to 49.9%. So what we want to point out to you here are a few things. First of all, if you look at southwestern Santa Fe, you look at the area of Tierra Contenta and then the areas immediately adjacent to Tierra Contenta. So the area Tierra Contenta is that second wave of over 50% Hispanic. Some of the neighborhoods north of Airport Road are even in that 75 to 100% Hispanic, as is the precinct south of Tierra Contenta. So, and then going up the course, the Cerrillos Road corridor, you also see high concentrations of Hispanic, adult Hispanic, as well as on the other side of Cerrillos. Now, one thing that's fascinating here is that Brittany is going to point out St. Francis, and one over to the left, I think, almost there, unless I'm wrong. Yeah, I think it's the straight one going right up. Basically, there are no precincts east of St. Francis where a majority of the precinct adult Hispanic population is more than 50%. There are no precincts east of St. Francis Drive in Santa Fe where the majority of adults are Hispanic. Another thing to point out is, Brittany, if you can go to the very top of the city of Santa Fe where there's that dark purple one, that is really a precinct that's primarily in the county, and there are only 4 people in the city in that dark purple precinct. So disregard that. That's really mostly a county precinct that happens to have a few people in the city. Same thing with the precinct right next to it. They're just not, it's not a large population within the city. But generally speaking, that area of southwestern Santa Fe going up the Cerrillos Road corridor, and then some parts also south of Cerrillos Road there are the highest concentrations of Hispanics within Santa Fe. Okay, we're going to now focus on the current districts. And the reason it's worth spending 3 minutes, 5 minutes on the current districts is because really when you're looking at changes, possible conceptual changes, it's nice to focus in on these current districts. So here, districts 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are the current districts. There's also the precinct numbers that are shown in them. You will, besides receiving on the city website, all of the current districts and conceptual plans will be posted. And when you're looking at them on the website, or when we send you a different link in a Dropbox, the clarity of the street names will be much better for you. And so the PDFs within the presentation are not quite as clear, but you'll see improved clarity on what you'll be receiving. But let's think about these current districts for a moment. First, let's remind ourselves that these districts were adopted by the Santa Fe Redistricting Commission in 2015, taking into account the annexation that occurred in 2014. As you know, again, we're looking at 4 districts, the dual member districts, 2 councilors elected in each, and then the terms are staggered. So there might be 2 councilors in District 1. One of those councilors would run in 2023, another would run in 2025. The same with all the districts. So in any given election cycle, there's always a city councilor running from each of the districts, and they're in staggered terms. Notice that the city is bordered by I-25 in the south. So that's the city limits. So when you're looking south of I-25, that's outside the city. Notice that the village of Agua Fria in white there is not in the city of Santa Fe. And so you see the Santa Fe bypass, this narrow strip there, which is part of the city, and it is a connecting road. But the areas in white by Agua Fria are basically outside the city. That was not part of the annexation that occurred in 2014. Notice that the boundaries stay on major thoroughfares and physical features. We find that this is important to minimize voter confusion. If you can stay on the main streets, people have a harder time, easier time recognizing what district they're in, and hopefully creating an identity for that district. But for a moment, look at districts 3 and 4 and notice that they are consistent with the racial patterns of Santa Fe, enabling both districts to be a majority adult Hispanic. So you remember we looked at the map, the color map, the heat map on the proportion of Hispanic adults, and it roughly reflects what you're seeing in districts 3 and 4. We didn't do it, the commission didn't do it 10 years ago in 2015, just to deal with racial issues. No, they did it because the community of interest happened to be consistent with some of the racial, ethnic, and economic interests, in that 3 and 4 then became majority adult Hispanic districts. So if we look at and stick with this one, District 1. So District 1 covers the northern part of the city of Santa Fe, and it's bordered by East Alameda Street and the Santa Fe River, and also by Cerrillos Road. And District 1 goes down Cerrillos Road to Seiler Road right there. And so that's District 1. It's covering a lot of land, but it takes that much territory, that much geography to get to the right population size that we talked about. So this district really includes the downtown and the plaza area. It includes Santa Fe's east side, it's generally called the east side. And it also includes a lot of the west side neighborhoods off of West Alameda Street and Agua Fria Street. And so it's a compact northern part of Santa Fe, including downtown plaza, east side, west side. District 2 covers southeastern side of Santa Fe. And the border, of course, between districts 1 and 2 are also the East Alameda Street and the Santa Fe River and Cerrillos Road on District 2. Basically, District 2, though, when we look at the border between Districts 2 and 4, it pretty much is roughly Yucca Street and Llano between 2 and 4. And District 2 includes all of those neighborhoods off of Old Pecos Trail and Old Santa Fe Trail. It includes the neighborhoods adjacent to St. Francis Drive and St. Michael's Drive. And it includes the neighborhoods south of the state capitol building, you know, as you travel down Don Gaspar and Galisteo and all that. It's a compact district that is bordered by I-25 in the south, and primarily, again, Yucca and Llano between districts 2 and 4. So what about District 3? We're taking them in order. Well, District 3 does cover the southwest side of Santa Fe. You saw the map on the percent Hispanic in some of those precincts there. District 3 is consistent with that. And the heart of District 3 is Tierra Contenta. And as you know, Tierra Contenta is a master planned community within the southwestern Santa Fe. It's grown a lot. There's still plans for more growth in District 3, as well as plans for more growth in District 4 over time. But this district also includes those neighborhoods, both north and south of Airport Road, north of Tierra Contenta, and it also includes the areas south of Tierra Contenta and the airport where the District 3 label is. So it's a compact southwest Santa Fe district, which is one of the majority Hispanic districts that we talked about. And then District 4 covers portions of southern Santa Fe and basically encompasses those areas between Yucca on the east and then all the way to Cerrillos Road in District 4. But then it crosses over Cerrillos Road and includes neighborhoods between Jemez and Siler, just that strip there. And that was needed to make the population of the district large enough back in 2015. And it also further enabled District 4 to become a majority Hispanic district and not overly packed District 3. And so that's a summary of the current districts. At this point in time, Brittany is going to go over, I think we have one more slide I wanted to show, excuse me. You will get a packet that would include all the stats for all the concepts that Brittany is going to show. But this is the stats for the current districts using the 2020 census. So notice Brittany on District 4 show the 12.7% deviation. That's the same 12.7% deviation you saw on the map. So this is before any concepts. This is current districts using 2020 census. So notice District 3, that Tierra Contenta district, does have a 74% adult Hispanic percent, and District 4 has a 53.8% adult Hispanic population using 2020 census current district boundaries. We made sure both of those districts always maintain majority adult Hispanic. Notice the percent Hispanic in Districts 1 and 2, adult Hispanic, 32% and 30%. That sort of reflects that the chart that you saw when we looked at the proportions of percent adult Hispanic and non-Hispanic on that precinct map. So at this point, hopefully that's created a good context for us now to share with you, Brittany will, some concepts. These are just concepts. These are to get your reaction. Throughout the whole public process and commission process, we can adapt things, but we wanted to kick them off with some initial concepts.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Madam Chair. I see a committee member's hand up. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you'd like to go to that question before I start.
I'd like to have the whole presentation made, otherwise we could get into a lot of detail before we move on to discussion, and that will be from commission discussion will be under item number 9. So if y'all don't mind, I think let's just stick with the agenda and then proceed that way.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the commission. So as Brian said, these are definitely just conceptual plans. They're just sort of, ideas, ways to balance the population, ways to sort of rethink different districts. And so, this is not the end all be all. We just wanted to sort of start to spark discussion. But we have 5 conceptual plans that we're going to go over with you this afternoon and sort of start the discussion that way. So the first one that we'll talk about, we're calling Concept A, and you can see that here. We think of Concept A as a sort of minimal change plan. How can we adjust the boundaries just enough to equalize the population and make sure that we're staying within that plus or minus 5% deviation? And as you'll recall, District 4 was too big and needed to shrink. District 2 is too small and needed to grow. And District 3 was also too small and needed to grow. So what we've done is we really only needed to move one precinct between District 2 and District 4 to get District 2 to be the right size. And so we took this is precinct 29 right here. And this used to be in District 4. We moved it into District 2 under Concept A, and that allowed us to straighten out the boundary along Yucca. So we think this is a really good option that actually makes the lines a little bit cleaner. Between District 3 and District 4, things are a little bit more complicated. There's not just sort of a one precinct easy switch to make. And so we're going to show you a couple of ways that we've dealt with that boundary. I'm going to zoom in just a little. So if you'll recall, the current districts follow, District 4 follows Jemez Road between Airport Road and Agua Fria here. All of this is in District 4 under the current plan. What we've done under Concept A is we've taken, it's just 3 precincts north of, this is Rufina Street. And so we've taken those and put those into District 3 to balance out the population. And between those precincts and this precinct 29, that got District 4 within plus or minus 5%. Concept A does not change the boundaries of District 1 at all. So there are no incumbent pairings under Concept A. You can see the little stars. So these are the incumbents for District 1, the incumbents in District 2, District 4, and District 3. They're really close together here in District 3. And then District 3 and 4 remain majority Hispanic voting age population districts. So that's Concept A. Concept A1 is sort of a variation, another way to sort of think about how to deal with the boundary between District 3 and District 4. It's still sort of a minimal change plan. District 1, we didn't touch at all. Again, that was within the allowable population deviation. We made that change to precinct 29, moving it from District 4 to District 2, straightening the line along Yucca. But the difference in Concept A1 is here north of Airport Road, where we're still trying to sort of rethink what happens east of Jemez. And so what we've done here is we've tried to keep the neighborhoods north and south of Rufina together in one district. And so we've moved that neighborhood north and south of Rufina into District 3. This boundary here that you'll see, the sort of western edge of District 4, this is an alleyway that runs behind some houses. And so this neighborhood, these are 2 precincts, stay in District 4 as they are currently. The issue that we had when we did that is that these precincts here are slightly too many people. And so that actually put District 3 over the allowable population deviation, made it too big. And so we took 1 precinct from District 3 and gave it to District 4. And so you can see this is District 116. This is actually just east of Ortiz Elementary. Ortiz Elementary is right here. And precinct 116, it contains some mobile home communities, some commercial space. So actually this is where the auditor's office is. There's some car dealerships, there's a UPS and a FedEx. And we felt pretty comfortable taking this precinct and moving it from District 3 into District 4, because it has a little bit of a different flavor from these sort of Tierra Contenta precincts. And you know, sort of going with some more of that commercial along Rodeo and all of that. And so we sort of felt comfortable presenting this to you as an option. And again, the real goal here was to keep the neighborhoods around Rufina together and put those in District 3. So that's Concept A1. And then we have another flavor of this that we're calling Concept A2. Again, a minimal change plan. Again, we're sort of tinkering around the border of District 3 and 4. So again, District 1 doesn't change at all under Concept A2. Precinct 29 goes from 4 to 2, again, in Concept A2. But what we've done differently here is we still have this sort of, you know, these neighborhoods around Rufina. So again, this is Rufina, this is Jemez, where the current boundary of District 4 is. We've taken 1 additional precinct. This is a lot like A1, where we have these 2 precincts. This is that alley I was talking about behind that neighborhood. Going into District 4, we're taking 1 additional precinct here, going a little further west than we did in A1. But we still need to offset some of that population. And so here, instead of taking precinct 116, we take precinct 62 and put it into District 4. And the thinking behind this is the northern boundary of this precinct 62 is an arroyo. So there's not some really sort of easily navigable way to get from District 3, the rest of District 3 into precinct 62. So this is sort of kind of an outlier piece of District 3 anyway. Centennial High School is up here in the north, so that stays in District 3, but south of Centennial High School, south of that arroyo, this precinct 62, these are like larger lots, these homes on sort of 1 acre lots. We expect to see some growth happening here over the next decade. And so that was the thought of trying this out in concept A2 with putting precinct 62 into District 4. So that's A2. And again, just a little bit different around Rafina north of airport. So now I'm going to show you some different conceptions that are a little bit less sort of minimal change. We're calling this concept B. And the idea of concept B is, what would it look like if we held Airport Road and Rodeo Road as a boundary between District 3 and District 4? And, we wanted to sort of see, so currently District 3 and District 4 have this sort of vertical orientation to each other. And this is a more horizontal orientation where everything north of Airport Road and Rodeo Road go into District 4 and everything south goes into District 3. And to make the population work, the boundary of District 3 crosses over Cerrillos, which is the current eastern boundary of District 3, goes all the way to St. Francis, takes all of this south of Rodeo Road, and actually it hits Rodeo and then bumps up to Zia right here around Yucca. And so that's sort of what it takes to get District 3 the right population. So District 2, as District 3 sort of bumps east into District 2 from Yucca to St. Francis, District 2 moves a little west, north of Zia, coming here to Camino Carlos Rey, and taking just a couple more precincts here on the west. Again, under concept B, we did not touch District 1 at all. District 1 is the same as current. District 3 and 4, even in this horizontal orientation, as you might imagine, given the heat map of where the Hispanic voting age populations are, these are still two majority Hispanic voting age populations. What I want to call your attention to is what this does for the current incumbents. So the incumbents for District 1 are still wholly contained in District 1. The incumbents in District 2 are not affected, but both of the incumbents from District 4 end up in District 3. You can see those two under concept B. And so they're paired with the two existing incumbents from District 3. And then under concept B, there would be no incumbents in District 4 under this conception. So this is just sort of a different flavor, a different way to think about it. Again, a little more sort of substantial change. The next concept I'd like to show you, and actually the final concept that we've developed for your consideration today, is concept C. And it's another sort of version of that horizontal orientation of Districts 3 and 4, but a little bit different. So rather than following Airport Road to Rodeo Road, District 4 follows Airport Road to Cerrillos and comes up Cerrillos. And so then rather than the eastern boundary of District 4 being along Siler, it moves to Baca here. And this is actually just west of the School for the Deaf. So the School for the Deaf would stay in District 1 under concept C, but District 4 would sort of run up really close to it. This is also a different conception, finally, for District 1. As I said, in all of the A concepts and in B, we didn't adjust the boundaries of District 1 at all. But this is a different way to sort of think about District 1 as sort of a central Santa Fe district. So currently District 1, as we talked about, takes in downtown Santa Fe and the plaza, but doesn't go as far south to pick up the Capitol and those sort of older neighborhoods around Galisteo and Don Gaspar. Concept C would actually have District 1 coming all the way down to St. Michael's in between Old Pecos and the railroad, and taking in all of that sort of central Santa Fe from the capital to those older neighborhoods, and then retaining downtown Santa Fe and the plaza. And so what that means then is that, we're taking that territory from District 2. So District 2 pushes further west. And so you can see this is Yucca, the current boundary between District 2 and District 4. District 2 moves significantly west from Yucca, following Rodeo here into District 3 under Concept C. And then what happens with District 3, staying south of Airport, south of Cerrillos, is that we're sort of uniting the area both north and south of Rodeo. So there's some residential, but there's also a lot of commercial here. So this sort of triangle between Rodeo and Cerrillos, this is where like the Target is and the Sam's Club. And so all of that would end up in District 3 under Concept C. Again, Districts 3 and 4, majority Hispanic voting age population. And then we're seeing again that sort of pairing of incumbents. So both incumbents from District 3 and the District 4 incumbents would be in District 3 under Concept C. The District 2 incumbents here and here would remain in District 2. One of the District 1 incumbents remains in the district. The other one actually ends up under Concept C in District 4. So you can see them there. What's interesting about this is this incumbent, their term expires in 2023. And so, they would have the option of running in District 4, where there is no incumbent running in 2023. But this is a very different district than the one they were elected to, right? They were elected to District 1, which currently is that sort of plaza, downtown Santa Fe, sort of the northeastern part of Santa Fe. And then, they would end up needing to run in this District 4, which is, this more sort of Hispanic, around Airport sort of district. And then the other incumbent from District 1, whose term is going to expire in 2025, would end up just running in District 1 in 2025 if they chose to do that. So that is Concept C. And again, it's a change from current, but we wanted to give you something to sort of chew on and think about. So Madam Chair, that's all we have. I'm happy to continue to share my screen if there's specific questions about the maps, but for now I'll stop sharing and thank you all very much for your time.
Wonderful. That's a lot to think about. A lot of thought went into those different concepts. We appreciate you bringing them to us. I think we need that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to begin our work. And I want to go into the conversation about these different discussions, options, but we need to follow the agenda. So I'm going to jump to action item number 8. And then after that, we will do matters from the commission and we'll have conversation and discussion on there. And actually, item number 8 says action item consent, which we have nothing to do there, but I just want to follow the agenda and say that because there's nothing under item 8, we're going to move from there down to item number 9, matters of the commission. And then now we'll begin our conversation and reaction by commissioners to the presentation. And I think the first hand that I saw up earlier, I believe, was from Commissioner Donato. Was that right? And so if you have questions, now would be the great time to field them. And then we'll just go down the line. Whomever feels they want to ask a question, just raise your hand. I'll put it on the list and we'll go in that order. Commissioner Donato?
Yes, thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can hear me because I was having problems with my computer today. I have a couple of basic questions, more of clarification than anything else, so it gets on the record. In the ordinance, under ordinance section 618.3 Delta, and number 3 deals with communities of interest. And it talks about including those based upon ethnic and economic factors shall be preserved within a single district. And I know we spent, the team spent a lot of time, and thank you, Mr. Sanderhoff and Ms. Ross, Ms. Poss, is that correct? Thank you very much. So did we take in, or did you take in economic factors in addition to the ethnic factors in both in your concept plans?
Let me take a shot at that, Brittany, and then you follow up. Yes, to the extent that on the racial information we provided, we took that into account. Unfortunately, there's strong correlations in Santa Fe and the state of New Mexico between high racial concentrations of minorities, protected groups under the Voting Rights Act, and income. Also, when we look at the housing, which is a form of the economic interests, we see that in District 4, in those areas north and south of Airport Road, and then north of Cerrillos Road between, let's say, Jemez and Siler, there are many trailer park neighborhoods, manufactured homes,
Right.
higher density apartments, and the like. And so as a proxy of economic interests, we did take that into account too, the housing stock as it relates to what's going on in districts 3 and 4. Obviously, the east side of Santa Fe and the north side of Santa Fe includes a lot of million-dollar homes, higher income areas. They're all preserved within the district, as you noted, is requested in the ordinance. And then you have a lot of those homes in South Santa Fe, really a combination of subdivision type homes, Bellama homes, Pueblo del Sol areas, and they've been linked together. So from the perspective of housing and how it, and race and how it relates to income, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I sort of figured that it would be homes as proxy. That's what, I'm from the Boston area, and that's what we use there as well. So thank you for that. The other point of clarification that I would like is that when we talk about communities of interest, do those communities of interest also correlate to other protected classes other than race, or in this case, economic status, economic factors? I mean, one of the things, I'm assuming you're using GIS as your modeling program. Is that correct?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
we use a GIS system.
Right, right.
Maptitude. Madam Chair, Commissioners, Commissioner Donato. Yes, I mean, Santa Fe falls into certain regions. And we talk about the downtown Plaza area. We talk about the east side. We talk about the west side. We talk about southern Santa Fe, southeastern Santa Fe, and we talk about Tierra Cantera Southwest. We try to maintain districts when it comes to concept A, A1, A2. Those are all minimal change. Try to
Right.
stick with what we have, adjust for minimal population shifts. So those are all working on the recognition that if you like what the commission did in 2015, and if you just want to adjust it, the A's would be your preference. B, and to that extent, it was no accident what they did in 2015, and similar to that 10 years prior to that and 10 years prior to that, that Santa Fe does sort of fall into certain regions on its own. Now, you have to combine regions. The west side is combined with the Plaza downtown. Why? Well, because you have to put together enough distinct regions to get a certain population.
Right.
And so, yes, A takes into account the basic regions of Santa Fe. B and C also take into account basic regions of Santa Fe from a different perspective. B, as Brittany said, looks at central Santa Fe in a different way, south of the Capitol, includes those neighborhoods. Plans that use Airport and Rodeo Road south of Santa Fe is a wholly different concept. It's a reasonable concept, but it has a lot of impact on incumbents. So the three concepts have different perspectives of what the communities of interest are. Brittany?
Yeah, and thank you, Brian, and Madam Chair and Commissioner Donato. I would just add that, in terms of legally protected communities of interest, I would say, that communities of color are definitely sort of number one. And then according to your ordinance, those sort of economic communities as well. But, you know, sort of in practice and in the public, you'll hear, hopefully, get a lot of public input about, you know, specific communities of interest. And as Brian said in his presentation, you know, it's communities of interest can be really tricky because it really is in the eye of the beholder. And so we sort of did the best we could, you know, with Brian and Michael's like really sort of long institutional knowledge of Santa Fe. But I'm excited for you all to do, you know, your 4 public meetings to really get folks to talk about their communities and their communities of interest and think about how our plans impact that.
Well, my last question, and I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Foss, because one of the other considerations that I've had to deal with in the past were other protected classes. And we know that based upon federal law and Supreme Court decisions, that now we've moved from 4 or 5 protected classes to 11 protected classes. And did your GIS modeling, especially your density maps, because I noticed that you do density mapping with regard to Hispanic populations, especially in 3 and 4. Do you take into account other protected classes in your density map overlays, such as religious belief or disability or veteran status, for example, because all of those are also protected classes?
I'll take a shot at that. For redistricting, the protected classes deal with equal population, make sure they're substantially equal,
right,
and protecting particular racial and language minority groups. When it comes to taking into account veterans or taking into account some of the other groups that you mentioned, those would fall into communities of interest that you could take into account if you feel that you can combine enough of them. Gee, you know, there are a lot of veterans who live in these 2 neighborhoods, and you split them between 2 different districts. Can you somehow put them together? Because I know a lot of vets have. That's the kind of thing that would speak to more to communities of interest.
I agree. And have your overlay maps revealed those other communities of interest that could be considered protected classes?
I would say we stuck to the ones that are protected under redistricting law.
Under VRA, right?
And that's equal population and not diluting minority voting strength. But again, there's no perfect district because
Right, no, I understand that.
Because
so you're focusing primarily on VRA and not EEOC or other, but we can consider those in the community of interest argument.
Absolutely.
Okay,
all
right.
And the stringency for the Voting Rights Act, frankly, is different in Santa Fe than it would be, let's say, in Clovis.
Right.
The courts require majority Hispanic districts in a place. I don't say African American. You can't build an African American majority district. Santa Fe, it's only 1% of the population, but in Santa Fe you have 46% adult Hispanic, so you can draw 2. But frankly, where the law requires the majority minority districts is where, when there's a dominant group of Anglos, let's say, that always vote as a block and prevent Hispanics from electing a candidate of their choice. So this type of district boundary consideration in places like Clovis and Hobbs, where there's white bloc voting preventing Hispanics from electing candidates of their choice, is so much more sensitive than a community like Santa Fe, where there's a long, proud history of people voting for people of all races and all creeds. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still strive to create 2 majority Hispanic districts. It's just that it would be required in Clovis, but in Santa Fe, the rules become less stringent in the eyes of the courts because you don't have this white bloc voting preventing Hispanics. In Santa Fe, 30% Hispanic districts are electing Hispanics, and it shows that the bloc voting is less pronounced.
Yeah, I saw that in the Metas decision here in New Mexico. And so thank you very much for those clarifications. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
So,
I
yes.
have
Brittany,
one thing
go
to
ahead.
add.
Sure,
Thank you.
Please.
Commissioner Donato, we would be very happy to add data to the maps and sort of and look at things. I hope this isn't too in the weeds, but I did just want to mention, that the units of geography that we're looking at are pretty small. They're precincts, and the data that we get are pretty limited at that level of geography. And so when we start to bring in other types of data, it's usually at a higher level of geography, and so it can be hard to sort of pinpoint exactly where those types of communities of interest are. But we'd be very happy to look at those data and think about how they could inform this process.
Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pasta. Thank you, Commissioner Donato. I think the next one I saw up, I hope I saw it in the right order, was Commissioner Breckner. Could you please unmute yourself and pose your questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And let me take my hand down while I'm thinking about it. I had one question and one point of clarification. The clarification I'm looking for is, I believe Mr. Sanderoff said right at the beginning in the presentations, both last week and this week, that redistricting is based on total population, all persons who have a residence in the various areas we're looking at. And yet the some of the charts that we've looked at are adults only, adult populations only. Is there a reason for differentiating, and is that having any impact on the divisions and what we're looking at and understanding here?
Yes, and that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I don't think I clarified it enough in this last presentation. When we're talking about substantially equal population among the districts, staying within the plus or minus 5% from the ideal population of the district, we must use total population. All people get counted. When we talk about the Voting Rights Act and whether we can create majority Hispanic districts, in other parts of the state, majority Native American districts, then the courts require that we look at adult population, voting age population. So everywhere we spoke about percent Hispanic, Native American, African American, we were talking about percent adult population, voting age population. And everywhere we were speaking about making sure the districts have substantially equal population, there we were looking at total population.
Thank you for that clarification. It's helpful. I appreciate it. And my other question relates again to communities of interest. The city on its website has a page that shows and maps homeowners associations and neighborhood associations. And they use their GIS mapping to do that. I wondered if you've looked at that and considered taking that into consideration, and even whether precincts take that into consideration for that matter. And in dividing and shuffling around precincts, are we potentially breaking up neighborhood association or altering neighborhood association boundaries or homeowners associations?
I'll take a shot at that, and Brittany, you can add if you want. I did look at that. There are a lot of neighborhood associations that luckily fall on St. Francis and Edge. So any plan that keeps St. Francis on precincts to the east are automatically not split. There are some important neighborhoods that always come up historically in Santa Fe, Tierra Contenta and Casa Alegre and various other ones that I look to make sure we didn't split. Is it possible that some smaller neighborhood association has been split? It's possible, and we can take a look at that. Also, as you implied, sometimes the precinct boundary won't conform to a neighborhood, and sometimes the precinct might split a neighborhood association, and then you'd be forced to include both sides of the precincts together, which could create compactness issues. But usually those are the things that come up in the public meetings. But we did, at least I looked to make sure some of the larger neighborhoods were not split, but inevitably I wouldn't be surprised. Luckily, we're staying on major thoroughfares, and most neighborhoods don't go beyond, St. Francis Drive or Cerrillos Road. But when they're split by a major thoroughfare, it is possible that we split a neighborhood association. And then you have to decide, do you really like that Cerrillos Road border between two districts, or do you want to start snaking it a little to conform to a neighborhood? And that would be a choice of yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm mainly concerned, yes, the major boundaries are the major roads, but within that, as the consideration of what precincts should move where, I just thought this mapping of homeowners and neighborhood associations might be looked at along the way as well. And I have no idea of the currency of what the city has on its website either. So, things may have changed from that. So I'm not saying it's definitive in any way, but it's just something I looked at and was curious about. But thank you for the clarifications.
Sure.
And Madam Chair and Commissioner Bruckner, we could work with Mr. Padilla to, if he's got that GIS file and we can overlay it over our maps and just double check and bring any sort of issues to the committee next time.
Great, thank you.
That's a great suggestion. Great questions, Commissioner Bruckner, and thank you, Brian and Brittany, for those comments. And I think the more we can do to respond to commissioners' questions during meetings and provide information based on their questions, I think the better decisions we'll all make. So I think that'd be a great idea. And since Mr. Padilla is here, we certainly welcome his help in overlaying that information and working with our consultants. So thank you.
I'll forward that to them.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Was that all, Commissioner Bruckner?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Quintana?
Thank you. Since I was wondering, since the concepts have been put up and people are probably very interested, if you could just remind us what this means, like something like concept C, what does this mean for incumbents? If you could just go over that, I think that might be a question on people's minds. Certainly myself, just so that I know.
Sure, I can take that one, Madam Chair and Commissioner Quintana. So basically what happens is the districts come into effect at the next election. So for incumbents who are running in 2023, they'll be running in the new districts. And so if they happen to be in a district, so for concepts B and C, where those District 3 and District 4 incumbents who are both running in 2023 are paired, those folks would need to run against each other or decide whether or not they want to run against each other in 2023. It is a little tricky because those counselors whose term doesn't end until 2025, they'll continue to represent their existing districts until they run in a new district in 2025. So it's a little bit tricky with staggered terms and double member districts, but that's generally how it works.
Thank you for the clarity.
Is that helpful, Commissioner Quintana? Did you need more detail on that? Did you need to know how many commissioners, how many city councilors were involved? Was that part of your question?
No, I just wanted to just real quickly just understand what the redistricting would mean to them.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Quintana?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Commissioner Grazier, and then we'll go on to Commissioner Donato again.
Yeah, thank you,
Chris?
Madam Chair. So my question is whether it's appropriate or possible, I guess, even to pay attention to growth areas and not concentrate those in any particular district so we keep more on track through more of the cycle.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Grazier, I think there's a couple of ways to think about that. One is, do you sort of split up those high growth areas into more than one district, which, may have some implications for communities of interest, right? If we know that Tierra Cantata is likely to be the place where a lot of growth happens, like, do we split that into 2 districts? The other thing, the other possibility to sort of think about and consider is, do you just draw those districts sort of on the lower end of the population deviation, knowing that then they'll grow? And so rather than sort of having it at, plus 4%, you keep it at maybe minus 4%, to sort of be mindful of that growth and give it a little more room to grow. And that's definitely something you all can think about doing.
Commissioner
you.
Grazier, anything further?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, that was an interesting question. That's like, we need a crystal ball to help us with that, one. And let's see, I think Commissioner Donato had a follow-up question. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
A very quick question, and that is, on the existing map, you gave us the over/under percentages. Will we see those over/under percentages on the concept maps as well? Because we don't see them presently.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Donato, we are going to give you the table. Similar to what Brian showed during the presentation, you'll get a table of data for each conceptual map, and that will have the deviations for each district. And they all are within plus or minus 5%, but you'll see the exact number on that table.
Good, thank you very much.
Okay, anything further? Commissioner Donato?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I have no further questions.
Okay, anyone else? Commissioner Grazier, you still have your hand raised. Do you have a follow-up question? No, okay. Going once, going twice. A lot of good questions. I'm not sure that gives Mr. Sandoff any direction other than some responses to some of the questions that were posed. At this point, Mr. Sandoff, what is the next step that you all will be undertaking? Now, we still have to talk about or listen to public comment if we have any at the end of this meeting, which may provide some additional information that you all need to look at, Mr. Sandoff. But at this point, where would we go with our next presentation from you all at our next gathering?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, one, we could look at the neighborhood associations and overlay them, see if we have any big issues that we need to bring to your attention. And in the next meeting, we would hopefully get some good public participation and show the concepts again. If you don't have any suggested revisions for us today, and see what else comes out of the meeting. So again, pretty much today, you can tell the reason we gave 3 different flavors of A is because A is more of the status quo oriented communities of interest of Santa Fe as it relates to current districts. Then we B and C are just wholly different approaches. One where Central Santa Fe comes down and Airport Road, Rodeo Road, the districts say south of Airport and Rodeo, and that has big implications for incumbents. So at some point, we'd like to hear also a discussion among the commissioners as things evolve about, how much do we take into account these other concepts when one takes into account the role of incumbency and the potential confusion, which is more important. Those are all the types of things you'll have to weigh to provide us with more direction. But you're being hit with a lot of information all at once here, and so we're not necessarily expecting anything big to come from this.
Okay. And I appreciate that. There is a lot of data, and looking at these maps and then sitting down and getting a feel. I pretty much know where all the streets that you mentioned are, but some of the commissioners may not. It would be good for them to digest the maps and look at them and understand them a bit better. So yeah, it's a little more challenging right now to give you further direction because we just recently saw the maps. I do appreciate the sequencing of the different concepts, with the one that is less disruptive being A, and showing the changes there without displacing a lot of the city councilors. I mean, I think there's some, a lot of logic to that. And so I appreciate the way you've sorted out your concepts. But again, I'm very anxious to hear what our public members in the community have to say and how they feel this would impact them as citizens and voters. And so, well, I also, like you, look forward to the public comment to see what we're going to hear in that regard. Does anyone have any comments to what Brian just said in terms of additional direction to the commission? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Commissioner Beckner? Muted, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yes, I think it would be very premature, for speaking for myself, for me to weigh in any way, shape, or form, having just seen these within the past 2 or 3 hours. But I would be curious what research and polling is looking for when you're looking for feedback, a week or 2 weeks from us and further questions on these concepts, or sooner, or in between meetings in some fashion. I just curious how the process and the timing might work for you all.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and the city clerk may want to weigh in on this. I think because of the Open Meetings Act, if you were to provide us with guidance outside the meeting, it might be in writing, and it might be something that would also be posted on the website. Or you could make a decision that you want to hold off your feedback until the next meeting. I guess those are 2 considerations. There might be other options out there I'm not thinking of, but
I would just kind of give my response to that. I think the majority of our work should be done in our meetings. That way the public has the opportunity to listen and be part of the dialogue. And then at the end of the meetings, because from now on, we're going to have public comment at the end of the meetings. That way the public has the ability to listen to what we're talking about, digest it, and then react to it at the end of the meeting and move forward in that regard. If we start doing individual emails, I think it gets complicated, and I'm an advocate of transparency, and I think that could get in the way of being transparent. So that's my take on it. City Clerk or Assistant City Clerk, did you have any comments in that regard?
I will actually weigh in on that. And it is true, when there's individual direction from commissioners, it's hard to know if that's the consensus of the entire commission. And I think creates some inconsistency for our consultant. Additionally, depending on the number of individuals that have weighed in on the decision, that could trigger a rolling quorum issue as well. So I do think that unless there's unanimous consensus, that individual direction would be taken into consideration. But again, if there's conflicting direction within the commission and emails, that's something to also be aware of. So it's really, oh.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
Well, I just in asking the question, wasn't presuming that was a good solution. I was just asking the question to better understand what kind of process research and polling was looking for. And then in addition to that, when if we have another meeting, how soon research and polling would like for us to start weighing in, so you can proceed with your adjustments or further research.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Commissioner Breckner. Yeah, we'd love to have it at any time in any public meeting. And oftentimes you might have a suggestion that we could even address very quickly, and perhaps even get it up on the website for new alternatives. And so, yeah, at any time that within a public meeting, you can provide us with some questions or insights, we'd be glad to be very responsive to addressing them at a minimum for the next meeting, and at a maximum, maybe getting them on the website before the next meeting.
Thank you.
Is that it, Commissioner Bregner?
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else have additional comments, questions? Okay, so I think that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which would be matters from the chair, which are going to just include some of the conversations regarding scheduling of meetings that we started last time, as well as community outreach issues. Those are the two areas that I felt we needed to touch base on, also being mindful of the time. I know we're trying to get done by 5. But so since we're talking about timing and we're talking about data to Mr. Sanderoff, let's talk about the scheduling of meetings. Because we really have 2 months, before we make that final decision. And that's not that long of a timeline. So it sounds like, well, let me open it to conversation, and then I'll just give you all my thoughts based on some of the calendars I was looking at. So does anyone have any comments or suggestions regarding timing? We did talk about at our last meeting having our next meeting on May the 5th, and we allowed that 2-week time period because we thought there was going to be a lot of changes that needed to be made, and that would give the consultants time to do that. But at this point, we really haven't given our consultants any direction to do a lot of work in 2 weeks. So conceivably, we could have another meeting next week. And I'll leave it there and let me open it up for conversation. Board members, commissioners. Commissioner Quintana.
I was just wondering if we're going to continue with the Zoom platform for the rest of the.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. Maybe it was just me.
Will we continue with Zoom virtual meetings? Is that the plan?
Well, and maybe I'll let the city clerk jump in, because I know the city's changing that policy, and our city clerk, Melhelsik, I'm sorry.
It's okay, Bustos
I need to drink some
Melhelsik. I
water.
know it's anyways, the city is changing their remote meeting because with our emergency order. So as of May 11th, meetings will be back in person. So any meeting between now and May 11th will continue on Zoom, and then after May 11th, we will transition to in-person meetings.
Anything else, Commissioner Quintana? Okay, so that gives us a couple of weeks. We could have Zoom meetings still, and then from there move on to the in-person, probably hearings that we'll be having in person, which makes a lot of sense to allow community members to join us. Any other questions from the commissioners, comments or thoughts about the setting up the meetings? I'm going to suggest that we consider having a meeting next week. And that way, commissioners will have time to digest the data that they've seen today and come up with suggestions that then could be presented to Mr. Sanderoff and his staff that would then put us in a position to start giving them direction. That's one suggestion. And then from there, we could give Mr. Sanderoff 2 weeks after next week to get what he needs prepared, taken care of. And then the other thing I want to throw out for consideration is we talked earlier about having all of our meetings on Thursday, and we did talk as well about having our hearings in the evening, which makes a lot of sense to allow for more participation. But as I look at the calendar, the months of May and June are busy months for families and children and schools and parents. And so Thursday evening meetings may, because of graduation and all kinds of activities, may prevent some members of the population to not attend. So I don't know what the commission thinks about maybe looking at Tuesday evening if that works, or even Wednesday. But when you have activities at schools, it's usually Thursday, Friday, the weekend. That's another thought I wanted to throw out. So those 2 points I wanted to open up for conversation. Anyone?
I would just ask the question from Mr. Sanderoff or Ms. Paulus. how long it will be before we get the backup data, the additional charts and information that you've talked about sending to us relating to the 5 plans you showed us.
Sure, Madam Chair and Commissioner Breckner, the clerk and assistant clerk have a link to a Dropbox with all that data in it, and hopefully they could send it immediately after this meeting.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
then in answer to your question, Madam Chair, I agree with you. It makes sense to explore other nights. I think we should perhaps hear from staff. I know Tuesday evenings tend to be a busy time for other city meetings that staff may be involved in. So I just raised that point of consideration as well.
Good point. Any other comments? Appreciate those 2 comments.
And Madam Chair, before a final decision is made, if we could also at least hear what that might be, because we're aiding other cities and school boards and have made certain commitments as well.
Right.
So hopefully.
Okay, great. No, I think that makes sense. That's why I'm got my calendar for the months of May and June in front of me. And if we can set those timelines out, I think it just makes sense for everyone. And so I want to hear from our city clerk to see what she's got a little bit of a worried expression on her face to see what she thinks about our timelines and our evening meetings. So, but yes, Brian, we do want to be mindful of your commitments, because yes, we already told you Thursday and now we're looking at something different. So we'll figure it out really quickly to make it work. Madam City Clerk.
No worries. I think we have flexibility on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the one thing I would just note is, depending on the time, when Mondays and Wednesdays are really big city meetings for us in other ways, and constituents, but depending on the time, Thursdays are fine, and Tuesdays are something that we can absolutely accommodate.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So Mr. Sandoff, is a Tuesday evening problematic at this point for you? Or you already have some commitments that would prevent you from working with us at our hearings in that regard?
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I might not be the best one to answer that question. I don't know if Brittany and Michael's in charge of scheduling, but
Yeah, I can speak to that, Madam Chair and Brian. Wednesdays would be very difficult for us. I think Tuesdays would help.
Okay. So it sounds we have a consensus and does that work for the commissioners for the hearings to move them Tuesday evenings? Do I have any heartburn from anyone?
No problem for me.
Okay. All right. So I'm just still checking. Madam City Clerk, shall we set up the dates now and just for the hearings, and then a meeting next week? Now the meeting next week, since it's not going to be in the evening, can still be on a Thursday. Is that correct? That would be the 28th. So that would be the meeting. So the board members the commissioners could get all the backup data sent to us in the next day or two, because the city already has that, and that backup data will answer some questions. It'll give our commissioners a week from today to digest the data. We come back Thursday. We present whatever suggestions the commissioners have based on the digested data. And then that could still be a day meeting. And then the meetings after that would turn into the 4 hearings. And those 4 hearings could be held on Tuesdays. And then if we could tentatively identify those dates now, that would also be beneficial, not just for everyone's scheduling purposes, but also for us to publicize, the city publicize the upcoming hearings so that the community knows, and we need to probably publicize them all together so that the community knows they have 4 different options. If they can't make it to one, they've got 3 other options. Is that a possibility, Madam City Clerk?
Madam Chair, my recommendation would be to give us dates to look at, and then we can review them, because I also will need to secure locations for those or desired locations. So I don't want to commit to just, for example, the Southside Library on a certain date without verifying that it's actually available. But if you would like to, if the commission would like to propose dates for the public meetings, we absolutely can look into available locations between now and next meeting to see what we can accommodate. But so I'm happy to explore certain dates and locations, but then we can verify at the next meeting that they're available or not, if that's okay with the commission at this point.
Fair enough. Any comments on that, any commissioners? I think that's very fair because. Okay, Commissioner Donato.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a meeting to actually discuss the digested concepts on the 28th. And then I guess the clerk is going to come back with some ideas on public meeting dates. Is that what I'm hearing?
She's asking
we're
us,
planning on doing-
right. She's asking us to come up with dates. Is that right, Madam City Clerk? Yeah.
Madam Chair, yes. If there are dates that you would like us to explore, then we can look at available locations for those dates. So I think setting a meeting for next week with the commission, we can absolutely accommodate. But I would just like to note that if there are certain dates you would like us to explore for the public kind of hearings, that we have an opportunity between now and next week to verify that the locations and dates are available for, say, the Genoveva Chavez Center, community room for the public, Southside Library, or any desired locations for those meetings that you're proposing.
Well, I think that the Tuesday night dates beginning on, I believe, May 10th, if my calendar's right. And then the follow-on 2 weeks after that for the 4 public hearings, I think that's one that we should seriously consider. Because it seems like everybody's in agreement with a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening works well for everybody. So I'm in favor of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Donato. So then bouncing off of that, if we have 2 public hearings in May and 2 public hearings in June, the first public hearing in May would be May 10th, Tuesday evening. The second would be 2 weeks later. I think it's May 24th, Tuesday evening. And then following up in June, the third public meeting could be June 7th, a Tuesday evening. And then the next one, 2 weeks later, June 21, Tuesday.
The
Did I get
only
the dates right? Yes.
consideration on June 7th is, I believe that's our primary day. That's an election day for primary.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yes.
well, then that's not a good day to do
No.
this.
So I think on that June 7th one, we may want to go back to a Thursday to a June 9th.
We could just do the 14th and the 28th of June.
Sure.
Shall we do that?
I'm actually, yeah, I'm out of town on that week, the June 7th week. So the next
Which week?
two would be
Which week?
much preferable for me. That June 6th, June 7th week.
Okay, so June 14th, Tuesday, and June 28th, Tuesday, are those better days for the hearings in June?
Yes.
Chris? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary, for pointing that out. I didn't have that on my calendar. I don't know why. Okay, any more comments on those? So those are 4 tentative dates. And Christy, I know you have your hands up. Reaction?
Madam Chair, could you repeat could you repeat the dates?
May 10th, Tuesday. These are all Tuesdays. May 10th and May 24th, June 14, and June 28th. Okay. Madam City Clerk.
I do have just 2 quick questions. One is May 10th. The commission could actually meet on Zoom and we could promote the first public hearing as an online, people could weigh in with a Zoom link and a webinar if that's a preference for this commission. Just want to flag that in terms of timing. I think that might actually be a really nice first meeting for the commission and allow for citywide participation regardless of location. I do, again, just want to note that. But then I also just want to see if that is the preference, if there are locations for the other 3 meetings that you would like us to explore, to kind of move around the city, sort of sneak in different districts. I know we had originally thought maybe the Chavez Center, the Genoveva Chavez Center could be a possible location in the community room. And then the Southside Library are 2 that had come up, I think, and have traditionally been good meeting locations if necessary. So if there's another location that you would like us to look into for possible dates, please let me know as well.
Thank you for letting us know about the Zoom. So we'll look at our April 28th meeting on Zoom and the May 10th meeting on Zoom. And then the next 3 hearings will be in person. And Christine's recommending the Chavez Center and the Southside Library, which have traditionally been used for these hearings, which makes sense. Does anyone have another recommendation, option location? Commissioner Britchner.
I would ask the assembled group to think about, because some of these changes affect the area north of Airport Road and northwest of Cerrillos, whether there's any public location in that area that might be available, because both of the other locations are more on the south in the existing district 4-3, if I got that right. So I'm thinking maybe in a location that has significant impact from some of the proposals that are made might be worthwhile. And I had one other question. Let's see. For the Zoom meeting, the first public meeting, May 10th, if I heard correctly, there will be a web page from the city with these maps available to the public in advance. And if that's the case, for that first public meeting, I'll presume that will be publicized so the public can look at these in detail before that meeting if they choose to. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Madam Chair, may I?
Yes,
provide
please,
additional
please.
context?
Absolutely.
We can look at the convention center as well, if that's a desired location that's more in District 1 and close proximity for District 2, if that's something that we want to look at. And then just to note, the presentation that was provided to the commission today is already available online as packet material. And it will be posted, the YouTube link and video along with the presentation will be posted on the redistricting webpage as well. So that'll be available probably in the next few minutes.
Wonderful. So
We have a redistricting webpage now. I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair.
No, I'm sorry. You have the floor. I'm sorry. I interrupted. Go ahead.
Is there a redistricting webpage up now? And
Yes.
And where is that in the city's website area?
I will send the link to this group if that's.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
That's a great question, Commissioner Bretchen, because one of the things I'm just navigating the city website now because of this volunteer job. And so I've been learning. It's a big learning curve. But I think anything we can do to make the redistricting data user-friendly, because it's a short window. If you have to go to 3 different places on the city website to get that data, unless you know what you're looking for, you may not find it. If there was any way that maybe on the main page of the city website, it talked about redistricting commission, something to get to one click on the main page will get people there. I think that will serve us well to provide transparency and more quick information for the city residents. But I appreciate, Burl, you bringing that up because we need to have that information out there and easily accessible. So anything you can do, Madam City Clerk, to get that going, I certainly would appreciate that. And you also mentioned the convention center. Are there other, that's in District 1, correct? Are there other areas in 2 and, I'm sorry, in 3 and 4 besides Chavez and Southside? Because as mentioned earlier by one of the commissioners, those are the areas that are more impacted by these recommendations. If you could look for another area, another site to have one of the hearings that falls within those 2 impacted districts, I think that would, at least facilitate more participation from the affected districts. And you don't have to answer that now, but maybe you can look at that and we can chat about that and then report back to the commissioners next week. Is that
I would
okay?
suggest maybe look at a school, if the school district would allow a school to be used.
Oh, well, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. So can we leave that to you, Madam City Clerk, to look at something else in addition to Chavez Center and Southside Library in one of the two affected districts? That was something else I was going to mention. I lost it.
Perhaps even a senior center?
Yes.
Senior or community
That's
center?
a great idea.
Possibly like near Alameda.
Actually, that's a great idea.
Sort of furthest west on District 1. But
So senior center or school in those areas. Those are 2 great ideas. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we're going to need to start doing some outreach, community outreach regarding the public hearings and getting the information out to the media and to the newspaper. And I know the city's in charge of doing that for us, but I'll be chatting with Madam City Clerk to see what we need to do. If I need to write a letter to the editor on behalf of the commission in order to promote these dates, we can start doing that after next week's meeting. Once we get the dates finalized and the locations finalized, we need to get the word out that we're having these hearings and these are the locations and this is how you get to them. And so I'll be working with the staff figuring out what's the best way and multiple ways to get the information out. Comments? Those are the 2 issues I had, the community outreach work that's going to be ongoing, and then the scheduling of meetings. And I think we got pretty close to them now, and we're getting close to our time. I need to check and see if we have anyone online for public comment, because that is an item for on the agenda. And I guess, Christine, you would be the one that would get that notification and you would let us know if someone's out there holding on and waiting to speak.
There is not
Okay.
anyone in the waiting room, but also
Okay.
Assistant City Clerk Cardenas. Is there anybody that's provided any written comment or anything?
No, we checked through the PrimeGov portal and no comments were left.
So we will be entertaining public speaking comments as well as written comments. Okay, that's great to know. I didn't realize that. Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Mr. Sandoral.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, when it comes to providing us with direction and ideas and all that, that'd be great. But one thing we've learned over the years is just after looking at all the concepts, just among the commissioners to say, what they like and what perhaps they don't like. We did a meeting in city of Albuquerque recently where we showed tons of concepts, and they decided just to ask the commissioners, well, what do you think? And 70% of them chose the same plan that they really liked. To just have that discussion of what looks good and what doesn't also is another way of allowing us to continue to fine tune the plans that seem to make the most sense. And so we don't always need direction, change this precinct to that precinct. Instead, sometimes it's nice to hear just what you all like or what are the high points of the plan and low points of the plan. That provides us with also some inspiration to come up with other versions.
Great point. I'm glad you mentioned that. And now's a great opportunity to let Mr. Sanderoff know what of those concepts floats your boat and you might think would work to present to the community. Any comments?
Next week.
Next week, okay.
And that's what I was referring to next week.
Okay, all right. I've just given everyone another opportunity, any chance we can. Okay, anything further? I think I learned last week that so next meeting, just gonna announce it now, will be April 28th, Thursday at 3 p.m. on Zoom. And we will then react to our consultants regarding the backup data that we've received. And once we've digested all the maps, then hopefully we'll be able to tell Mr. Sanderoff, this one is really the plan I like, this one looks good, or maybe a version of this one and that one together. So next week, we should be able to have a good conversation with our consultants about what we feel comfortable in presenting to our community. Okay, and then having said that, Madam City Clerk, anything else? Final words or Ms. Cardenas? No? Okay, then at 5:01, according to my clock, I call this meeting adjourned.